Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Bre. If you are new here, I live in Kansas Zone 6B, and today I'm going to show you what my garden is currently looking like in the month of May. This is a series that I do every month leading up to about October, November to show you guys the differences every month and how the garden is currently looking and evolving. And today I'm so excited to show you how the garden is currently looking like in May of 2023. This is actually my third year doing a May garden tour, so it's been really interesting to look back on the previous 2 years and see exactly what's more advanced this year versus other years and vice versa. So I can't wait to jump in and just show you guys what it's looking like. But first, I don't know if you guys can see the girls or not, but they're all just hanging out on the bench. They love hanging out on the bench over there, and I think it's just so cute. So I typically like to start these tours right here in the front because you can see a lot of the changes happening right in the front from the very beginning throughout the entire year. So starting off, I showed you guys how I had a volunteer, what I think is a Goldie Honey Bear sunflower, just going absolutely crazy. And this thing has probably tripled its size in the last month. It's starting to go crazy. I'm starting to see little buds. Then I also have a volunteer chamomile plant over here. And what's funny about this volunteer chamomile is I really didn't think my chamomile was going to come back in its previous spot, which it didn't. But since showing you guys this volunteer chamomile last month, I have found 3 other little pockets throughout the garden space where it's just volunteering itself. So I actually pointed them out to my husband, and I'm gonna put sticks in the ground because they're all in the ground. I don't want him to mow or weed whack them by accident. But I've been harvesting this chamomile plant every 4 or 5 days. I'm just trying to get a bunch of harvest off of it. So that's why the chamomile plant kind of looks a little off at the moment, because I've been harvesting the hell out of it. But as we keep going, one thing I wanted to show you guys is how the tomatoes are currently looking. They are doing really well, and also I am going to actually prune back some of these bottom leaves. Some of the very bottom leaves are now slightly touching the soil, and that's something you don't want when it comes to tomatoes, because that can just really introduce a lot of fungal problems, especially if it gets dewy in these mornings. So I am going to take my pruners. One second, I set them over here. So one thing I like to do with my pruners is I like to take an alcohol wipe or a Clorox wipe or something to disinfect between cutting each plant, because you don't want to introduce any fungal problems, if there is any fungal problems, to any other plants. So just keeping your pruners clean is something really important. These looked really clean, but as you can see, they aren't really clean. Having wipes just in your pocket, or just having a spray bottle of alcohol and a towel works really great to do something like this. But pruning off these bottom leaves will help us defend against any fungal problems. I'm not having any issues yet, but it is something that now that these tomatoes have grown a little bit, I want to go ahead and get these leaves cut off. Even if you missed it, I did plant out the garden with you guys about 2 weeks ago, and these plants have grown so much in a matter of 2 weeks. This was just something I didn't want to do when I initially started planting, just because I didn't want to stress out the plant even further. But none of these bottom leaves are crucial to this plant. I'm also going to cut off some of these beginning suckers that are happening, because I have 4 cherry tomato indeterminate plants here, and the more that they branch and spread out by these sucker plants, the bushier this thing's going to get. And this thing got wild and crazy last year, so I kind of want to tame it just a little bit better than I did last year, just again to help with airflow. And that's one thing I did differently this year with planting out the sides. Is last year I did a lot of big crops, kind of like corn and okra on the sides. I think it kind of didn't help my airflow as much as it possibly could. So that is something that we're just going to keep tabs on this year. All right, so proceeding with the front, our nasturtiums actually transplanted pretty well, which I am shocked on because they did not look too hot. But we are starting to get our first little buds of our zinnias. There's our chamomile plant looking all sorts of hot. This one's actually starting to give me a little flower. Oh, looks like we have our first bud in the calendula as well. And also, I do have a few peppers going. So we have a few cayennes starting to pop up. All of my peppers are looking really good. And then we also have some paprikas starting to form. I was pinching off all of these leaves or all of these flowers prior to planting, but oops, I just accidentally took that one off. But then I left them the moment that they have been planted. So I brought this basket out, which I found this basket at an antique mall this weekend for $3, so I had to score it. It's this like cute little flower harvest basket. I am actually going to be harvesting some garlic scapes once we get over to the garlic, but I'm also going to go ahead and just snag some strawberries. My strawberries are starting to look so good. So I built this strawberry cage, right? Because the previous 2 years I have grown strawberries, I've barely got any ripened strawberries, yet alone white strawberries that are forming. Birds and squirrels, the moment they saw a single strawberry even starting to form, they didn't care if it was ripe, they were snagging it. So it's crazy to see how much abundance I am truly going to get out of this little strawberry patch. So one plan I think I'm going to do with these strawberries this year is once they start to run out, I think I'm going to actually transplant out a second bed of strawberries and have 2 beds of strawberries next year, to where maybe I will have enough to preserve. I don't think I will have enough to preserve out of 1 bed. You need a lot of fruit to be able to do a lot of preserving. So I think that is the plan. My husband and I think we might just build a secondary one of these cages, because I also think it'd be really nice just to have for the chickens if I wanted to move them around, like even our front yard. So yeah, I'm getting some really good sized berries too, which I have not previously gotten out of these strawberries. These are 2-year-old strawberry, or is it the 2nd year? It is the 2nd year. Oh my gosh, this is probably the most beautiful strawberry I have ever grown. That's like actually a decent sized strawberry. So most of them come out this super itty bitty tiny little bit, but oh, this is, okay, let's see what else we can find in here, because I know that there's a few other pretty large ones. Here's one. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm gonna eat some breakfast with these strawberries once we're done. Ooh. And the thing is, so when a strawberry is like truly ripened on the vine, the greens will literally just fall straight off. That's how like tender and amazing these are. I never had a fresh homegrown strawberry prior to growing them myself, and honestly nothing compares to the flavor of a homegrown strawberry. It just doesn't. All right, let me get to this other side, see what else we can pick out of these berries. So I will get the additional berry that doesn't look so hot, like this one was kind of nibbled through, so I just toss them over to the chickens for a fun little treat, and they get really excited about it. So this cage here was something my husband and I did a build video on, if you're interested in building it for yourself. I personally have been really loving this thing. I think it's been really handy. It's been working really good. The one thing I love about having chickens, oh my gosh, this is this is another beautiful berry, is anything that would go to waste doesn't go to waste, because something that I won't eat, they will eat, and I find them just a huge benefit. If you are newer here, this is my 2nd year. I mean, this is my now 2nd year with chickens. Aw, this one is actually kind of nibbled through. So I am having a slight issue with a few roly-polies, and I am going to be putting out beer traps. So if you don't know what a beer trap is, all you do is set out a little bit of beer in a shallow dish, and a lot of those roly-poly type of bugs, they will just go into the beer because they smell it, and it's a really easy organic way to deal with those types of bugs. I really haven't had much of an issue, but on occasion I'll find a few things that have been eaten up. Ooh, that might be like the most ripe one. This one is dark red and beautiful. Not too shabby. I've been picking these berries every few days, kind of like the chamomile, to be honest, and I'm getting quite a few berries. I think what I might do is start to freeze them and use them maybe for smoothies and such. So as we are talking about like this strip of plants here behind me, one, this yarrow is going absolutely insane. It is starting to bud and starting to bloom a little bit. I'm so excited about the yarrow. So this is year 2 for yarrow. It is a perennial in my space, and I plan to really chop it pretty low. And I want to hang dry these and make dried like yarrow bouquets. I did make a yarrow tincture last year, and I have plenty of it left where I really don't need to make that tincture again. So I want to play around a little bit more with like a cut flower style of yarrow this year, because I originally planned yarrow for medical purposes. So that's really cool. Another thing, so when it comes to my onions here, I'm so over crabgrass. It's not even funny. I'm just not a fan of crabgrass, to be completely honest with you. If you don't have issues with crabgrass where you are, consider yourself lucky, because I personally find it 10 times worse to deal with than any type of weed I typically have to deal with. It just wants to keep spreading. It spreads underneath the soil. You have to pull it up. And one thing with onions, if you do not know, is onions don't like to have their roots disturbed, really. So you have to be on top of your weeding. Same with garlic. Those roots are really shallow, and if you don't want any type of disturbance, you really gotta be on top of your weeding. So I've been having to weed a ton of crabgrass. Really thought I did a good job last year of getting most of it out, but apparently I didn't. So I have had one issue with one of the beds. So the one furthest back here next to the strawberry bed, I had to reseed my squash, which I will say my zucchini squash seeds are like 4 years old. So if this round doesn't produce, I might just have to go get another packet of zucchini squash seeds. But other than that, my carrots are germinating really well. They're all starting to pop up. And the one thing I am really impressed on that I really wanted to touch on was my onions. So when I look back at my previous 2-year garden tours, like I mentioned in the beginning, my onions are one of those things that really stand out to me. Last year, they were pretty small, last year they were okay size, but they were nothing like they currently are now. I planted these onions out 2 weeks earlier than I did the previous year. And then if you look back at 2021's garden tour, these onions were puny at this point. And I actually got a better harvest out of my 2021 year than my 2022 year. And I think it was mostly because I actually cut my 2022 year a little bit short by mistake. So I ended up cutting off these green tops last year, and that really introduced a lot of fungal issues and issues with my onions to where I had to pull them way early, at least like 3 weeks early. So this year I haven't done any type of trimming of the green tops, and I have to say they look so good. I am hoping that this is the year of the onion, because I am so proud of how these are currently looking. They were looking like a hot mess there for a hot minute, because with Kansas and our wind, these green tops were just looking so funky that I was like, wow, I don't think anyone's going to even know I know how to garden, because these look like crap. They look like a chaotic mess. But now that they keep growing and the other greens that have kind of fallen over are helping supporting all the other greens, because the one thing I was worried about not trimming these greens up was they might fall over and whatnot and maybe prematurely mature, but that really has not shown to be the case. So really curious to keep a tab on these onions. On the corner of my eye, I saw this onion, and that thing is looking beautiful. I will say I only planted out a handful of reds, and most of these are a yellow hybrid variety from Johnny's called Caliber. Again, just super excited about it. Also, I forgot to mention our romaine lettuce is looking really good. We have some other herbs like white sage and dill over here. And then we also have our Rika blueberry plant, which I should be getting some blueberries off of really soon, as long as the birds don't beat me to this. All right, so Trellis, Ellis is my trellis tunnel. And here I have loofah, squash, like a honey nut squash, cucumber, watermelon, and cantaloupe all planted. So right here in the front, I have my loofah, which is what I had previous to last year. This is my 3rd year growing loofah. Year 1 was a complete and total fail, but year 2 was a high success. So I planted 2 loofahs on the sides just like I did last year. But the one thing I found really interesting looking back at my May garden tour from last year is my loofah plants are probably about 6 to 8 inches taller or longer than they were at this point last year, which I'm not really too concerned about, because these are really starting to take off, and the moment they take off, they really start to grow really fast. But loofah is one of those really long crops. Even last year, so currently right now we have about 5 months until our first expected frost date, which I really don't even want to think about, to be completely honest. But that 5 months still isn't long enough to be able to dry out all of the loofahs that this plant will produce. So last year I did process quite a few of my loofahs green. I think I had like 40 something of them green, and I only was able to harvest about, I think, 8 to 10 of them fully dry off of the plant, which is significantly easier. When they are green like that, that was like a lot of work, but I was not letting them go to waste. It took good day to get those clean and hung up and all of that. But it is one of those things that if you are growing loofah, I found that I have to start the plants inside, especially if I want to be able to harvest them off of the vine dry. So I'll be really interested to see how this year plays out. Obviously, if we continue to have a pretty warm May, these things will continue to take off. So right behind my loofahs, I have a honey nut squash, which again, I also grew last year, and it is so nice because it is vine borer resistant. And this is one of those squashes that is true to being vine borer resistant. It's the one squash I've had success with in my 6 years not having vine borer. I did have a gnarly patch of squash bugs last year with it, but growing anything vertically, especially with squash bugs, is just so easy to be able to see any type of eggs or any type of bug. You can just grab it really fast, throw it in some soapy water. This is my first year growing watermelon. I am growing a sugar baby watermelon, and then I also have my Howell's jumbo cantaloupe, and I have cucumbers called the Excelsior. Someone commented in my video a few weeks ago when I was planting out how to pronounce it, and I didn't practice, so here we are. But it's a hybrid from Johnny's. It's a greenhouse variety. But I am really excited for this tunnel area here because it is like my favorite part of the garden, but it also can crank out and produce so much for this space in a small little space. So that's one of my favorite things about this. There's really nothing to look at the moment. It's just a metal tunnel, but it will be glorious pretty soon. All of the Howell's jumbo cantaloupe is seeds that I saved from my plants last year, so I'm really excited about that. I also have a ton of pots that I'm not showing you guys. They're just full of zinnias and little drumstick flowers, calendula, oregano, just all the pots. I also have I think this one is a Mongolian. Is this one a Mongolian? No, this one's a Russian mammoth sunflower. All right, so let's talk garlic because this is going to be one of the first things out of the garden this year. So I saw scapes forming as of last week. I have not trimmed any of them off yet. I am going to do some of that today because some of them are curling pretty well. So we're gonna go through and snap off any of the ones that are curling. So with garlic scapes, you do want to remove them. I grow all hardneck garlic, so you will get a scape with hardneck garlic, but you won't with softneck garlic. You want to take or cut back, whatever you want to call it, the scape. Here, let me take one right now. You can easily snap these off of the plant, but when they start to curl like this is when you want to harvest them because you take away, this is essentially a flower stalk. It is forming a flower of seed. You wanna take this away because this is going to send all of the rest of the energy into the bulb formation that we want for the last 4 weeks. So a good indicator that your garlic is starting to get ready to harvest is you will see these, but then your bottom leaves will start to die back. So when to harvest garlic, my indicator is the last 4 leaves of the garlic from the very bottom. So you'll go 1, 2. So right now I have about 1 full leaf died back off of most of these plants. Is starting to get onto their second. And once they're about 4 leaves down, died back, is when I will harvest, which tends to be about the second week of June. At least that's what it's been the previous 2 years. But you don't want to let them die back too much because each one of these leaves is actually part of that paper around the garlic head, to where if you let too much of the leaves die back, you're letting too much of the surrounding like papery layer of the garlic die back, and that's going to expose that garlic head and it can actually rot in the ground. So going too long is not a good thing, but you really want to time this out accordingly. It is really simple. The garlic gives you some good cues when it comes to knowing when to harvest it. But when it comes to these garlic scapes, a lot of people will make pestos out of them. They'll do a lot of, I've done stir fries with them in the past, but my favorite thing to do with these garlic scapes is to actually just freeze them and use them in different broths and stews and stuff like that. It adds a lot of really nice flavor. I have found that if I do chop these up in any type of way, I like them in really small pieces. But I really just like to use them in all kinds of soups and stews. I think it works great like that. But yeah, you can see there's quite a few of them curling. So I need to go through this before I go in today and get these harvested off. There's so many of them forming. This really kind of creeped up on me this year. I mentioned this in last week's video about how this is my 6th year garden. So I feel like I have a lot more experience to where I'm not having to like research everything this year, to where it just, so many things are just creeping up on me because I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess it really is time already. So yep, that's what they look like up close and personal. They are really yummy. They smell so good, and my hands currently smell like garlic. So the one thing I find really interesting with the garden this year is potatoes. So I am growing an organic Kennebec potato in these 2 beds here. The one thing that's different about these 2 beds, if you can't already tell, is this one is not as full or abundant as this one. And the difference is, when I went to go plant these beds, is this whole bed was filled of really small whole potatoes. And then this one was filled of potatoes that I cut up prior to putting into the ground, because the seed potatoes I got were massive. They were like the size of softballs. So it's advised to cut those up. I really didn't think it would kind of, not stunt, I don't know the word I'm really trying to go for here, or hold back, I don't know the word I'm trying to go for here. Either way, the potatoes are behind these potatoes. I just started to hill up this one, and I did notice I have a few areas that are a little bit patchy where the potatoes aren't fully coming in right in the middle, but these ones are doing so good. I have about a foot's worth of straw on here now as far as hilling them up. I don't know if I will really hill them up much more past this foot. I might see how they grow, but I should be good as far as hilling them up at this point. So hilling them up simply means like putting extra dirt, or in my case, straw. I like to use straw just because it's a little bit easier to pull apart, get the potatoes out, all of that. But you don't want any sun getting on your potatoes. So that's one reason why you do that. They will continue to grow. You don't want any exposure to the potato. But I just have found this very interesting because the beds are the same soil. They were amended the same, all of that. I even got the soil tested, so I amended the same, all 9, but yeah, really interesting. So I'm going to be really curious to see if my harvest dates will be slightly off, since I feel like these potatoes are probably like 2 weeks behind these ones. This is a 90-day variety of potato, I believe, so I will be harvesting these come like mid-July. I will be harvesting all of my garlic mid-June, and onions will also be harvested like beginning to mid-July. So as you also might be able to tell, I'm going to have a lot of garden beds open up. So with my garlic, my plan is to plant out a second succession of tomatoes, peppers, a bunch of different sunflowers, and also green beans. And then also once the onions come out, those will also be planted with green beans. I like to freeze a bunch of my green beans, but I am currently sowing a bunch of seeds for that second succession as we speak. All right, so over here I have 3 different varieties of tomatoes. These are mostly all determinate tomatoes over here, but right here on my A-frame trellis, I do have some San Marzanos planted. And then here I have a Supremo, and then behind there I have, oh gosh, what is it called? Supremo. I ended up putting my little tags because I knew I'd end up forgetting. Plum Regal. So the Supremo and the Plum Regal are both hybrid varieties. So one thing that is different with an indeterminate versus a determinate is I don't like to prune my determinates a lot, because a determinate is more of a bush variety of plant. So the more you prune off those suckers, the less fruit you are actually going to get off of those. An indeterminate will continue to produce and just grow as much as it can possibly grow in a season. A determinate is going to grow, but it's going to stop growing. I actually prefer determinates over indeterminates. Is the less maintenance, to be honest, because you have to really keep up with tomatoes to keep disease off of them, and it can be really tricky, especially in like today's case. We got a lot of dew, so these leaves are actually kind of damp at the moment, and that automatically is just going to cause some type of blight issue, because that's how finicky tomatoes are. Oh, and I also forgot this plant right here. somehow got topped. I did notice, which I do have one more determinate plant in my basement. I think I might go ahead and take that one out and replant it. So I like to have backups. You honestly just never know if something will happen to a plant. So having a few backups is always really nice. Oh, and also back here behind all of my tomatoes is my little fabric pots, and I have okra in all of that. I have been getting a lot of questions on if I like my fabric pots, and I love fabric pots because they're cheap, easy, convenient, but around here they do dry out quite a bit faster, so I do have to make sure I'm on top of watering them a little bit more. But you'll see I have them all over because they're just really convenient, easy, and cheap, and I've used them for 6 years now. Okay, so this is the last little area that we need to talk about, and this is where all of my cool weather crops are planted. So I have broccoli, cabbage, lettuce, kale, kohlrabi, spinach, and a bunch of wildflowers over here. I'm actually thinking I might have like a random squash plant of some sort over here. I feel like there's a few sunflowers in this little mix, but the wildflowers are starting to bloom, and I'm so happy. I love these wildflowers. But over here, you can see how shaded out this area is. This area is one of my most shady areas, and that's one reason why I planted all my cool weather crops here, because cool weather crops are really tricky to grow here outside of like the fall. Even then, fall can be kind of tricky just depending on our weather. But over here, I feel like it's really helping out because this area right here shades out during the peak sun, and it really doesn't get too hot over here. So I have not seen any signs of bolting or anything, even though we've had like 4 days in the 90s and most of our days in the 80s. So I think this area is staying relatively cool. So I'm really hoping we get some broccoli out of this. The broccoli I did plant is a hybrid variety from Johnny's as well, called the Bell Star, and is supposed to be more stress resistant. So I'm hoping that heat stress is part of their heat stress resistant. But everything is doing really, really well over here. I do have some little bit of a holy situation with a few of my cabbages here because I've been hand picking off a lot of pests. That's what I typically do, and I did have some cabbage moth caterpillars all over that I picked off the other day, but they have been leaving my broccoli completely alone, but not my cabbage. And honestly, I grew my cabbage more for the chickens anyway, so if this is kind of just a catch crop, I'll be happy with it. I don't mind cabbage. I like eating cabbage, but typically I'm good with like a few cabbages a year and I'm good. So I'm still going to keep this as healthy as possible, but if it were to go to a bunch of caterpillars, I don't care as long as my broccoli is good. But everything here is also just doing really well. And once this space is done, I won't replant this area come like midsummer. I might replant it for a fall planting, but what I'm actually going to do is redo the chickens' little fence area to where it comes over here to give this space a break, and they can work this area and give that one a break and vice versa. That way that whole area doesn't just get completely messed up. But yeah, that's what this space is currently looking like as well. One thing you might be thinking is, Bre, why do you have these hoops but you never covered it with insect netting? I know. That was the original plan and then I never got to it. So I didn't want to trap any bugs into this area. So once the bugs are already there, you can't really get them out. So. All right, guys, well, that's going to conclude May's garden tour for 2023. If you're interested in watching any of my other garden tours, I will make sure I link the playlist up above. But as always, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye.